Hello. Hello, and thank you for coming. I want to welcome those in attendance. I'm Jeff Gowing, Mayor of Cottage Grove and President of the Oregon Mayors Association. In May, 25 mayors from across the states formed a task force to address homelessness in Oregon. The task force was designed to reflect the diverse needs of our state faces from west to east, north to south, as well as from our largest cities, Portland, down to our smaller cities like Fossil. We worked to bridge these divides and came together in a unanimous consent to craft a unified legislative proposal. Over the summer and fall, the task force met regularly to develop homelessness response plan. We finalized our plan on October 14th and then shared it with the Oregon legislative and all the governor candidates. Today, I'm joined by the fellow task force mayors to share more details of our plan. We wish to humanly and quickly address homelessness crisis in Oregon through the partnerships between the state of Oregon and its 241 cities. This partnership will allow for the establishment of expansion of local community-based responses that provide immediate shelter, needed service, and secure safety for the unhoused Oregonians. During today's press conference, you will hear from 9 other mayors from across the state. Each mayor will provide greater detail on a proposal, as well as the impact of such proposals will have in their community. When we have finished, the LOC lobbyist Ariel Nelson will facilitate a question and answer session with press members. Members of the press who submitted questions in advance of this afternoon's press conference will be called first. If time allows, additional questions can be taken. It is our intent to take questions for approximately 15 minutes. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Lacey Beaty of Beaverton.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon. I'm Mayor Beaty, the very lucky mayor of Beaverton. I want to start by offering that the state has provided significant investments in response to the homeless crisis, but I want to note that those were one-time investments, and they were targeted to particular regions or to solve specific issues. As mayors, we appreciate those investments. At the same time, we're calling upon the state for continued investment with partnership with all 241 cities in Oregon to address the crisis. Because mayors, we are on the front line of this crisis. We are closest to the issue, and we are uniquely equipped to address it. And while we have significant skin in the game, our city's budget cannot do what needs to be done to solve this without significant state resources. We are requesting that each city be given $40 per residence based on the latest Portland State University calculations, with no city being given less than $50,000. To resource every city in Oregon, the total cost is close to $125 million. And it's important to understand this is not a one-time request. We are asking for annual funding because that's what cities need to address the crisis humanely and successfully. These funds will be used for outreach workers, street workers, housing navigators, shelter operations, and similar services to help stabilize our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness and move them into housing. Funds may be used for efforts to prevent homelessness and to serve the need of people whose housing is unstable. In Beaverton, we plan to receive, if this is passed, $3.9 million annually, and we have budgeted more than $6 million in this fiscal year alone to start a temporary severe weather shelter that operates full-time, a safe parking program, street outreach workers, and outreach workers stationed at our main library, coordinating staff, and support services through nonprofits grants. These programs are in partnership with Washington County and local nonprofits, including Just Compassion of East Washington County and Greater Good Northwest. We are connected with our community members who are experiencing homelessness. Even with that $6 million investment this year, it is not enough. We continue to have gaps. Direct funding enables us to provide direct support to culturally specific organizations in our communities, building stronger coordinated local systems from the ground up. This annual allocation from the state will enable us to restore dignity and stabilize our community members who are most vulnerable. In addition to the direct allocation for flexible funding, we are asking for capital construction investment statewide. In Beaverton, we are working to establish a year-round shelter. We have leveraged several sources for site acquisition, including federal, ARPA, state funding for homeless supports in the last few sessions. And we have used to acquire this shelter specifically and local Metro supportive housing bond funds through Washington County, which will operate this shelter. We are very grateful for those partnerships, and we are nearly ready to begin the trauma-informed residential improvements. But unfortunately, due to rapid and ongoing construction costs, we still do not have enough funds to complete our shelter. We need additional support from the state to close the gap. Thank you for being here today and carrying our message forward. It is my pleasure to introduce Mayor Wytoski of Dayton.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Beaty. I really appreciated the specific examples that you gave for a city like Beaverton, but I also want to point out that, of course, every city's allocation is going to look a little different, and so will the application. And that's one of the most important things to recognize in addressing why we need this to be direct funding. Every city in Oregon needs support to address homelessness, from large urban centers where emergency shelters and health services are urgently needed, from small rural communities where help is needed to weatherize homes and identify shovel-ready lands to increase the housing supply. All cities have residents struggling with stable housing, and funding to prevent homelessness is just as important as funding the more visible immediate threats to public safety. It's also critical that the funding be direct. Alternatives like competitive grants or county allocations and other models heavily favor larger cities who have staff to manage applications and programs, a luxury not affordable in many small cities, leaving our service providers and, more importantly, our unhoused residents out in the cold. Cities already have the proven ability to receive and apply program dollars directly. That was shown through our use of the CARES and ARPA dollars. But if funds go only to cities with highly visible challenges, the root causes of homelessness are left untreated. Not only is this inequitable, it's also ineffective. Compare the approach to healthcare. You could build the very best emergency room in the nation, and you could correctly treat every patient who comes through the door by setting bones, stopping bleeds, and giving the right medicines. But you would save those lives, but you would never reduce the amount of people coming in through those doors. Like with healthcare, we have to invest in prevention. Direct allocations will allow cities like Dayton to shift portions to local service providers for things like that, getting vital documents, weatherizing homes, and case management, as well as other emergency services and sheltering, while also utilizing portions to clean up things like abandoned campsites, abandoned vehicles, and supporting food banks and clothing facilities. We can also do things like subsidized prep work, SDCs, and other considerations to incentivize building in appropriate zones to improve our housing. Direct funding is the key to the flexibility. It also provides the equity and efficiency that we need to address the unmet needs of all those in our community. It is now my pleasure to introduce my colleague from Vail, Mayor Tom Villalpando. You're still muted, Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Wytoski. In Eastern Oregon, we're experiencing the same homelessness crisis as the larger communities located along the I-5 corridor. Unfortunately, given our remote location, investments by the state in response to the crisis have been less than what is needed to humanely and properly address the dilemma we face. Participating in the task force and supporting its proposal gives Eastern Oregon a voice at the state level so that our needs can be met with a local and regional approach. When it comes to Oregon's homelessness crisis, we must ensure that the state funding can reach all corners of our state. For a city the size of Vail, properly addressing the homelessness crisis is financially impossible. Our city does not have enough funds, the personnel, or the local service providers necessary to properly address the crisis. However, with the task force proposal, Vail would have the ability to redirect its allocation to other community partners, and if regionally, other cities in our county or tri-county region. With the ability to combine our funds, we can develop an appropriate solution to provide stable, safe, and humane shelter to our residents. Thank you, and it is my pleasure now to introduce Gena Goodman-Campbell, Mayor of Bend.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you everyone for being here. And in Bend, we spend a lot of time talking about solutions for our unhoused population. One of the greatest obstacles we encounter is a lack of ongoing funding. The success stories we hear about people who find jobs and permanent housing result from the work done at places like Bend's Lighthouse Navigation Center. Those places require consistent funding, not only to keep the lights on, but also to recruit staff, assist with housing applications and resume development, and ultimately reconnect individuals with support services, jobs, and housing. The capital funding we are requesting is as critical as the ongoing funding. Last year, the City of Bend applied for and was awarded funds to purchase a motel to use as transitional shelter. The purchase price was nearly $3 million, and that doesn't include the funds that we needed to remodel the property. As I'm sure the other city leaders on this call will attest, our budgets are dedicated to providing services even before those funds are collected. In Bend, for example, we maintain over 800 miles of city streets. We treat and distribute drinking water to nearly 70,000 customers, and we provide emergency and public safety services to a town of about 100,000 people. Capital funding empowers us to add concrete options for unhoused community members, spaces with roofs, indoor plumbing and heat, for people who are otherwise struggling to survive without shelter. Like I noted previously, places like Bend's Navigation Center can't operate without qualified staff. Connecting individuals living on our streets with permanent housing remains the overall goal, and we rely on a suite of services like medical and job connections, for instance, to ensure that goal is realized. In order for us to humanely and adequately address the crisis that is occurring in cities across our state, we need both ongoing and capital funding. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Mayor Lucy Vinis of Eugene.
Thank you so very much, Mayor Goodman-Campbell. It is critical for cities to receive funds directly as we desperately work to fill a service gap by creating shelter for people with no place to go. As much as we support and work with our county on the creation of permanent housing, the time and complexity of that goal leaves desperate people in our public spaces. Shelter programs address that gap in ways that counties often cannot. We need funds that we can put to work as quickly as possible into programs that we know work and help. It's also vital that cities receive ongoing funding, not one-time sums, as you've heard from my colleagues. Eugene's low barrier safe sleep sites and other shelter programs have served hundreds of unhoused people. We need to continue on this path to serve as many people as possible, both for the benefit of those who are experiencing homelessness and for the overall health of our communities. Providing physical sites and their operations is costly. Ongoing state funding would sustain those efforts. Cities and their residents cannot meet this challenge alone. We need the state's support. Without consistent and predictable support, we won't be able to maintain the progress we've achieved. People who have gained shelter could be forced to return to our streets. We have an obligation to address health, safety, and livability in our communities. We also do everything we can to encourage those in public spaces to utilize available shelter resources. And we support social service provider outreach workers who go to unhoused residents on the street to assess their needs, connect them with available services, and identify those who would benefit from special assistance. We know that people cannot stabilize their lives without shelter, and we've seen the positive impact that our investments in shelter have made on the lives of the unhoused people and our overall community. Thank you. And now it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Kate McBride, Mayor of Hood River.
Thank you, Mayor Vinis. When a city is small like Hood River and a smaller county comprised of small cities, regional collaboration is key to solving any problem, including homelessness. Hood River would use its funding to support already existing regional collaborative projects, such as our partnership with Mid-Columbia Community Action Council, who is now staffing, along with volunteers, our current winter pallet shelters. The city donated funds to help purchase the current shelters, but we don't have funds to come up with this kind of money every year. The City of Hood River and our regional partners, such as the state's current pilot project leader, Mid-Columbia Community Action Council, and Hood River Shelter Services, cannot provide these needed services on a permanent year-round basis without a state partnership. Ongoing funding is needed as well for funding capital projects. As a region, we've been able to provide pallet shelters for the past 2 winters in 2 different locations, but we have no permanent real estate to establish year-round sheltering. Even with many volunteers helping at our shelter sites. We need more funding to provide enough staffing to keep our pallet shelters and shower and laundry facilities open year round. This is the reason for both a capital and ongoing funding ask. The city also enacted a construction excise tax for affordable housing, which helps provide the second or third step for people experiencing homelessness. We are using the next 10 years worth of estimated construction excise tax to pay back a loan that was used to purchase 7 acres for 129 units of low-income apartments. We are doing absolutely everything we can, but we need the state's help to make a big difference in getting more people into a safe place to live. It's my pleasure now to introduce Dave Drotzman, who is the mayor of Hermiston and the League of Oregon Cities Board Treasurer.
Thank you, Mayor McBride. Our task force was able to do what often can't be done at the state or the federal level. We worked in a collaborative manner to form a unanimous opinion on this human challenge. We brought urban and rural, west and east together in a nonpartisan environment and focused on solutions to address our city's needs in an equitable and holistic manner. We recognize that each of us has our challenges that are as unique as the cities we represent, and that one-size-fits-all solutions are not the answers to our individual needs. We need direct financial allocations to cities so that each city who knows the partners within their region that are successful can be given the resources to continue on with those successes. And where there are gaps, we can work with our local partners to fill in those gaps. Hermiston specifically is part of one of the 8 pilot projects funded in the legislature last year. However, when you are building a program from the ground up to support the homelessness challenges that face 4 unique cities in West Umatilla County, $1 million doesn't go very far. We need the resources for ongoing operations, outreach, counseling, education, and further capital infrastructure dollars to continue the build out of those facilities. Dollars that we don't currently have in our general fund budgets. We are looking for a partner in the governor's office and at the legislature that recognizes this is a human emergency that we are all responsible to try and solve, and that our community's challenges are as unique as the cities themselves. We fully believe that local problems are best solved by the local individuals closest to the problem, and that cities are best positioned to get those funds out the door to the right partners in the most expeditious way that this emergency requires. Thank you, and it is now my honor to introduce Teri Lenahan, Mayor of North Plains and incoming OMA President.
Thank you, Mayor Drotzman. So as you can see, each community has its unique challenges, and a one-size-fits-all solution won't work for every city. That is why the Oregon mayors are working together on this issue. Cities are leading local and regional responses to homelessness with their county and local service providers. Many cities across Oregon simply cannot financially address this crisis. We are asking the state for permanent funding so cities can support long-term solutions to this crisis. Our West Coast neighbors are also investing a significant amount of money to address homelessness. For example, last year, California allocated $7.2 billion, and this year they are allocating $2 billion, and Washington allocated $800 million last year. In order to address the growing crisis of the unhoused in a humane and equitable way, we are asking for similar levels of support. When the task force announced its proposal, it was supported by 25 mayors from across the state. Today, that support has doubled. And when the legislative session convenes, we hope more Oregon cities will sign on, showing their confidence in this proposal. The mayors recognize this is a team effort. It is also a unique and wonderful opportunity for mayors from both urban and rural communities to come together to help our most vulnerable residents get the help they need to live a better life. They deserve it. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Ariel Nelson. Ariel is the lobbyist for the League of Oregon Cities, and she will moderate the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Lenahan. I'm Ariel Nelson with League of Oregon Cities. I will be calling on those members of the media who submitted advanced questions first in the order we received them. I also want to note for folks watching that this briefing will be recorded and available shortly after on the Oregon Mayors Association website. So I believe at this time you should be getting promoted from the audience to ask your questions. The first person we have is, I'm going to say the first couple names so that our staff can get folks promoted up, but Ben Botkin from the Oregon Capital Chronicle will be first, followed by Jim Redden, Portland Tribune, Robin Mataglia, Jefferson Public Radio. How we're going to start. So Ben, when you're on, feel free to ask your questions.
Yes, thank you. For starters, I wanted to ask, what's the dollar amount for the capital funding investment, and would that be a one-time or ongoing annual? Thank you.
Mayor Beaty, do you want to take that one? The dollar amount is 100. So we were prepared for your prepared questions, Ben, thanks. But the dollar amount is roughly 123 million for the total amount based on the per capita formula. Funding, I'm sorry. The capital funding, we are still growing. So for that request, we will have specific asks from communities. We have an estimate that it will be close to 100 million, depending on, but those projects will need to be detailed out and specific before they go to the legislature. So we're still developing that.
Sure. And going back to my prepared question, maybe you could just speak a little bit more about just the how the state mechanism for funding for homelessness works, and whether there's a systemic issue with that you're trying to solve or hope to accomplish. Thank you.
Sure, I'll take that. Lacey Beaty, Mayor of Beaverton. I would like to tell you that cities are the direct epicenter of this crisis, and we are the ones being held accountable for the homeless response, but cities have not received direct funding to solve this issue from the state. And so similarly to what was happening during COVID, as it was unveiling that cities were the epicenter and the most closest to the problem, the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the National League of Cities compelled our federal government to fund cities directly, so we could immediately solving crisis. Similar to OMA and the mayors here, we are asking the state legislature to fund us directly because we are closest to the problem and the ones being held accountable. I can attest as the mayor, I answer dozens of emails a day about this topic, and it is a very complex problem without a simple solution. But we do know uniformly across the state, direct funding will help solve this issue.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Jim Redden with the Portland Tribune.
What reaction or responses have you received so far from any of the candidates for governor or current legislators or legislative candidates?
Mayor Vinis, do you want to take this one?
I'd be happy to take that. I actually, Mayor Beaty and I were part of an event with candidate Tina Kotek, who is very supportive of this request. She really understands the need for direct support to cities. She knows it on the ground. And so I believe that if she were elected, we would have her strong support for this request.
Thanks, Mayor Drotzman. Do you have a follow-up, or does anyone else want to add to that if there's other conversations you're having?
I'd be happy to. This is Mayor Drotzman from Hermiston. I've specifically spoken to both of my local legislators and to several of the gubernatorial candidates and expressed support for the OMA task force proposal. My local legislators are definitely behind it, and I know the gubernatorial candidates are already looking at it and speaking to it as well.
Thank you. All right. Our next advanced question comes from Roman Battaglia with Jefferson Public Radio. Roman, are you on?
Yes, I am. Hey there, I have a couple questions. The first one was, you'd mentioned the funding allocation proposal is $40 per resident and then a minimum of $50,000. How did you arrive at $40 per resident in terms of deciding how much funding city gets?
Mayor Lenahan, did you want to take that one?
Sure, thank you. Hi, Mayor Lenahan from North Plains. The existing data on homelessness isn't available at the city level statewide, and we know the data that does exist is incomplete and doesn't reflect the full need. Every city across the state is experiencing unmet needs, whether that's to address the unsheltered homelessness or for prevention. Previous state investments have not reached cities equitably, so per capita is the equitable solution. We looked at the range of per resident amounts, $40 per resident, and a $50,000 floor are nowhere near the full cost of addressing homelessness in each one of our communities. But the result should be meaningful, and we are looking forward to a positive outcome.
Right, and the other question I had was, have you talked about oversight for these funds once it's given to be ensured it's going to be used appropriately? I mean, is there going to be measures of progress and how effective this funding is?
Yeah, I'll speak to that one, Roman. Again, this is Dave Drotzman from Hermiston. I think cities have a long track record of successful deployment of public funds, including taxpayer dollars from other agencies like the state. We were held directly accountable to balancing a budget and using our taxpayer dollars wisely. And if not, we are constantly held accountable and up for re-election. You can look as recently as the ARPA and the CARES funding and those direct allocations to cities, and we were directly responsible for those and allocating them to our community. And we were held accountable to each of those funds as well, in making sure that the progress that was intended and the intent of those dollars was spent within our community appropriately. So we're well versed in using these funds, and I don't see this as any other different process than what we've used historically and proven that we can do successfully in that deployment.
Thank you. And just one last quick one, would cities be applying for this funding if it got approved, or would it just be dispersed to all cities?
No, we're suggesting it's a direct allocation to all cities.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. Next up, we have Dick Hughes. Dick, I'm not seeing you listed unless you're under a different name. So if you can maybe raise your hand so that we can identify you and get you promoted to speak. Oh, there you are, Richard. Sorry, go for it. You're next up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're ready to go. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. My apologies. As far as your plan, I understand that you're requesting money. Is there more to your plan than requesting money? Or what would be different?
Mayor Vinis.
I'm happy to jump in on that one. Thank you for that question. Historically, cities have not received direct allocations. And Mayor Beaty alluded to this, that federal funds were directly allocated. We did benefit last year. The city of Eugene benefited and other cities from direct allocations from the state legislature in 2022 that we were able to use to help support the safe sleep sites that we have established, that will help us develop some of the infrastructure and build new sites, and that we also received some funding to support just the sanitation, just the public works kind of impact. So I think that we've developed the programs, and I think what you're hearing from all of my colleagues is that we know what needs to happen in our communities in order to address this issue, and we have a track record of doing that. And what we are looking to is being able to sustain those programs over time. So it's the ongoing commitment that we're really looking for, and that investment in local solutions, because it really lands this challenge of really lands on our doorsteps.
Thank you, Mayor. And just to make sure I understand, you're not proposing the mayors are not proposing as a group new programs or anything per se, but it's just having the money to do what the local communities and maybe collaborating with others. Okay.
That's right. And we have this ask is intentionally broad and flexible because, as you've heard, each community has a different set of urgent needs and different levels of capacity to meet those needs. So we're seeking the authority really as communities to address the specific needs within our communities and to have the resources to do that.
Thank you. And as far as my second question, folks have already sort of spoken to it, and that was how confident people were that this might be approved. But let's just say that the revenue outlook is not looking good for the legislature and the state in the coming years, based on the upcoming revenue forecast. So how confident can the mayors be that this money will be available and that the legislature will choose to do this? And I'm not questioning the need. Believe me, the need is evident and it's a high priority, but how confident can you be that this will be forthcoming?
Well, I can take that. Frankly, we don't have another option. There's really no longer a choice. Too many Oregonians are living on the streets. The resources are needed now. And while there's pilot programs that have been funded by the state, and those are good, we can't ask all of our Oregonian residents to continue to wait as we work on building everything from permanent affordable housing needs to pilot programs here and there in strategic areas to solve homelessness statewide. I can't speak for a legislature that's not fully elected yet as well. But what I will say is, with the amount of mayors that are jumping on board with this ask, and that will be jumping on board, and I have great confidence that many more will, I think that the message will be powerful enough to at least get strong attention from the legislature and move this forward. I think there's a good chance.
Will the mayors be able to rally community members to contact people in Salem, both virtually and in person, in force to testify in favor of this, much more than has been done in the past? Because there has been a big citizen outcry at the legislature for funding of homelessness programs.
Dick, this is Steve Callaway from Hillsboro, and I'll jump in with that. You know, there has been a huge outcry from the public for us to do something about it. And so, you know, Mayor Beaty mentioned, you know, dozens of emails, you know, a day. And we all, you know, whether it's in conversations in the grocery store, you know, whether it's a city council meeting and comments or emails, social media, we are inundated with us or with this mess, with this request. And this gives us an opportunity then to marshal that and direct it to the legislature, which is in a position to do something. And, you know, so how confident are we? Well, more confident than if we weren't bringing forward any proposal at all, because we know if there's, you know, if we don't bring anything forward, we know nothing is going to be given back in return. And so, you know, and I think that's why it's so notable that you have mayors of large cities, small cities, rural, urban, east, west, Southern Oregon. All of us are coming together for this. And while the revenue forecast may not look as bright as it has, you know, the time to try to get, you know, not even out front, not out in front, but at least try to catch up is now, before things become worse for those who, you know, are housing experiencing instability, because the time that wait to help them isn't, you know, until they're out of their homes. But let's work with those who are in their homes and those who we can get back into some stable housing.
Thank you all very
Hughes,
much.
Mr. Hughes, this is Jason Snider, the mayor of Tigard. And I would just add that I think you can expect the mayors that are participating to be in a full court press, to use a basketball analogy.
Okay.
The time is now. There are no other options. We must effectively address this issue. And you're going to see wide support throughout the state.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dick. Next up on the list, we have Leslie Thompson, Ontario Argus Observer. You on, Leslie? And then I'm not sure if Justin Much from Woodburn Independent or someone from Pamplin is here. Just going through the list so you can get ready. Grace Smith from KEZI. Are those folks on and ready? All right, I'm going to ask Leslie's questions from the Ontario Argus Observer.
Ariel?
Are you there?
This is Julie. Connor McCarthy raised his hand.
Okay, go ahead, Connor.
Hi there. Connor McCarthy with Fox 12. Just quick question. I know a lot of money is being put into trying to solve.
Connor, we do want to, are you with either the, I don't think, we want to go with the folks that we had in advance. I'll come after, I'll call on you afterwards.
Okay, that's okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask Leslie's question and then we'll move on. So they wanted to know whether the Mayor's Association or LLC is looking to find the funding solely from the state or whether it would require some kind of match from the cities. And I think Mayor Goodman-Campbell was prepared to the response to that one.
Sure. The answer is no, it wouldn't require some sort of match from the cities, but as I think all of the fellow mayors on the call have noted that cities are already contributing significant local funds to this effort. And in most cases, cities are spending a much higher percentage of our local resources than what the state is currently spending on homelessness from its total budget.
Thank you. And I believe the other questions have mostly been answered. If it's being tracked and how it will be reported, we've touched on that. There was one question, her last question from Ontario was, will there be suggested parameters on the spending? And I think that question was going to go to Mayor Villalpando.
Thank you. The use of funds will be flexible within the category of addressing and preventing homelessness. As it's been mentioned before and through the whole pandemic with other situations, is that we as mayors recognize that the one size fits all does not fit in anything that we're doing in rural or as opposed to with all of us together. Nothing is one size fits all. So having that flexibility to be able to spend it on prevention or addressing homelessness is it's huge for us. There's some cities that may have a food pantry, or might direct their money towards a food pantry or affordable housing. And that goes right along with preventing homelessness. So yes, we were asking for some flexibility in that spending. And as with any funding contract, we expect to work out the fine print with our state partners before finalizing.
Thanks, Mayor. Next, we're going to go to Grace Smith with KEZI. I see KEZI in the audience. And then after that, we're going to turn to Tatiana from the Register Guard. Julie, are you able to promote KEZI to speak? I got it.
Yep.
Grace, are you on? All right. If you're able to join us, let me know. But we're going to move on to Tatiana with the Registered Guard if you're ready. There's Grace. Hi. You're muted, Grace.
Sorry about that. So I guess just kind of overall, when can community members, start to see a change with this? I know that's a broad question, but just kind of like day-to-day stuff.
I'll be happy to field that one. So within this, it's going to allow, especially the smaller rural cities such as mine, to have the funding available to equitably start spreading that money around to the organizations that are competing for scarce resources. So not only will our residents see a shot in the arm of how this will help them, but it'll also be able to allow us to move into things like helping to fund affordable housing in our cities. The solutions that we can quickly direct funding to our provider partners is essential to making this work so that things can start happening at a more rapid pace. Each one of our cities is unique, and this proposal allows us to provide a targeted solution to each of our local problems more efficiently. As we have talked in this task force over and over again, what the Metro is facing is not necessarily what a rural community on the Oregon coast is facing. But we all see the problem and we all see that it needs to be dealt with. And as my good friend Steve Callaway mentioned earlier, we've got to get up on this. We've got to at least catch up. And I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Mayor Drossman, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment too. Thanks, Grace, for the question. you're already seeing some amazing things happening in our communities, whether you're talking about Portland or Bend or Eugene or here in Hermiston. The challenges we're running into are the resources that it's costing and the budgetary requirements that it's impacting. You know, we also have parks programs, public safety, and libraries, and those are all super important to our communities too. And so these are constantly eating away at the dollars that we're spending from our current budgets. And we need the state to recognize that this is a statewide problem, that we can use the resources to help us backfill our budget losses, to continue with the ongoing successes that we're seeing already happening in our communities.
Thank you, Mayor. And before we go to the next one, I think I missed a prepared question earlier. Jim Redden, are you still on from the Tribune? I believe you had a question for Mayor Wheeler. If you could raise your hand, otherwise I'll just go ahead and ask the question. Right, Jim had sent in a question last week, question for Mayor Wheeler. If this funding is approved, how would it be related to the homeless plan the Portland City Council is expected to approve on Wednesday?
Well, first of all, as I said, when I released my original proposals along with Commissioner Ryan, we can't do this alone. We need the state's help in order to be able to implement what we feel is the kind of programming at the level that we needed, at the scale that we needed. And it could absolutely help us fund key elements of those proposals, including food for people who are on the streets, outreach workers, infrastructure, basically resources that we need to get the program up and running. So it's critically important is how I would describe it.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, now on to you, Tatiana, Register Guard.
Hi there, thank you so much. I suppose I'll reiterate the question that was asked just before mine. I'm curious as well when residents are going to start to see and feel a difference. And I suppose to kind of be more specific, I know that this problem is huge, so it's probable that this is something that takes, years for us to actually feel and see a difference. Or I'm curious if any of the mayors here feel like with the solutions they have in place, this kind of funding could mean changes immediately.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump into that, Lucy, Vinis, and Eugene. We have made significant investments with ARPA funds and with the funds that we received from the state in 2022, and we see the impacts of those funds already. So we were able to establish safe sleep sites. One example of car camping site for people who are living in their vehicles, able to stabilize with showers and a place to eat. And these are working poor going off to work, and they're able to stabilize enough in that vehicle campsite that they can move on to more permanent housing. We're definitely seeing, as you will know, Tatiana, and others may not, but we had some established areas, public spaces in the community that we allowed large numbers of people to shelter in tents during the pandemic. And we were able to move those folks, relocate those folks into these new safe sleep sites that we have established. So the community immediately saw the benefit of those investments, and we'll continue to see more of those investments. And the danger that we're facing is that without continued financial support from the state, that we won't be able to sustain the work that we've done, and what the community will experience is a backsliding, that we will return back to conditions that we had prior to having this infusion of funds that we've had in the last couple of years.
And I'll just follow up with that from a small city perspective. It's been mentioned about libraries and public safety. For example, in my town, the tax rate's so low, permanently set by Measure 5 and 50, that we have to go out and ask the voters every 5 years for an operations levy for 2 positions in the police department and for an entire library. I would expect residents, once the funding comes through in my town, for example, and I think other small towns, to be seeing results within a matter of months. So beyond whatever's been done right now, so to speak. I think Mayor Vinis made a good point that a lot of impacts have already occurred now, but the additional pushing through and getting more results will be, I would think, relatively quickly compared to other programs in the past.
Thank you, Mayor. Was that everything, Tatiana?
I did have one more question. Thank you both, and Mayor Vinis, I'm sure we'll connect later and we can talk more in depth about how our community is going to, dealing with all of this. But I did want to ask today how this interacted and tied in with the TAC plan. If this is something, that the TAC plan is so out of date at this point and the numbers are off and we got to just create a new plan, or if this kind of falls into that existing framework.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It is certainly one of the burning questions, and council has addressed that. So the what we refer to as the TAC plan was a homeless assessment and shelter feasibility study, and we undertook that pre-pandemic, but it came forward with 10 recommendations, and all of those recommendations are really aligned with what we have continued to do in response to the epidemic, to the pandemic, and the increase in the number of homelessness. So, for example, the TAC report called for the creation of a permanent shelter. We have now, that shelter is now established and running and operating. It called for increased outreach. We have been using funds for increased outreach. It has called for better navigation systems. It had called for some landlord support for tenants. So we are doing all of that work, but you are right. The numbers were low when we did the TAC report, and the numbers are much higher. We now know, because we do a homeless by name count, that the numbers were really not accurate earlier, and so we need to expand. And we've learned a lot from the work we've done in the last couple of years. So the safe sleep sites is a whole new concept that wasn't in play when we worked on the TAC report, but we're recognizing the value of it in terms of enabling people to be in a safer setting that has sanitation, that has security, that has stability, and where a nonprofit service providers can actually reliably find the people they're trying to serve. So we've learned from that experience that it's very, very helpful to the people needing to stabilize their lives, and also creates a sense that for the community as a whole, that we've wrapped our arms around the challenge. So I would say we're following on that. The TAC report was a foundation. We're expanding on that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And I look forward to chatting more in the future about this.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have, we're over time. We have a couple more questions, one that was received in advance, and then the gentleman from Fox News, you can go after, but I wanted to, CHRISTINA GIARDINELLI, if we could promote her to speaking. I think we've already answered a couple of your questions, CHRISTINA, but if you want to, we have time for one more question from you before we turn over to Fox News. You're able to respond.
Sorry, it makes me reconnect when it changes the function. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask, this question was sort of already asked a little bit. So I'll focus on the second part of the question. You already mentioned that you had talked to some lawmakers and candidates. Is there a specific party that you expect to get support from, or are you seeing this across party lines?
Mayor Beaty, did you want to take that one?
Sure. Well, I could tell you, I do believe this is a nonpartisan request. While I've worked closely with Tina Kotek on the Ask for the Mayors, I do know she is supporting it. But listen, all you have to do is look at their campaign. All three gubernatorial candidates have made homelessness a top talking point. So that to me suggests that no matter who takes office, this is going to be a #1 priority. And there's no shortcut to relationship building. All of us mayors in our own community are working hard with our local state reps and senators to make sure they understand our unique problems. Here in Beaverton, I've been taking them on tours, walking tours of our downtown so they can understand what we're doing. And I know every mayor is doing this because we talk about it quite often.
And then go ahead.
I wanted to invite some other cities' perspective on that. I don't know if Mayor Wytoski, if you wanted to comment, or Mayor Stovall, if you haven't had a chance to say anything yet.
Sure, I'm happy to add to that. I have a lot of agreement. I think homelessness is highly visible in a lot of communities. It's not as visible in other communities, but it is everywhere, which means it's the responsibility of all leaders I think that any candidates for the legislature or governor, but especially the legislature where that's going to be a lot more localized, any candidate who's not looking for a solution is off track. And I do also think that, you know, our mayors, we had 25 on this task force, but these are not the only mayors talking about this issue statewide. And as our press release went out initially, I started getting immediate contacts from neighboring mayors who had questions, from legislators who had questions, and some of them were various questions about accountability and projects and guidance, but a lot of questions were how do I support this and how do I get behind this? Because this is something that everybody's going to have to deal with. So I view this as an extremely almost apolitical, not even nonpartisan. I would go past that. This is a human issue. This is an issue, you know, of safety and sanitation and care and humanity, and all kinds of things that really don't care about D's and R's after your name. So I hope that candidates for the legislature as well as candidates for the governor's office will look at that the same way, because I think any candidate who wants to lead our state is going to have to recognize the crisis we're in, and I would encourage any of them to embrace this as an opportunity to lead us through it.
And I would, you know, I could second all of that. What Mayor Beaty, Mayor Wytoski just referenced is critical. I think you can see just from this task force, just from all of the, similar to what Mayor Beaty said, all of the gubernatorial candidates have all referenced this as a critical issue. And everybody said that this is a human issue. It absolutely is. There is no question as to that. And I believe that there have been very few issues that have risen to the top that has gotten the overall support that this has. And I think not just from a perspective of the folks that are leading our state at the legislature level, but everywhere that we see folks in elected positions, many of us are talking about the homeless issue and what we need to do about it and the consistency that we have to have in referencing the potential solutions that are there that we can begin to implement. So this is universal. This is bipartisan. This is apolitical. This is really something that we have to bring every resource. And it's something that's been going on for far too long. You know, one of the things that we talk about with the team here in Gresham is compassion without accountability is not compassion at all. And so we have to bring compassionate solutions, but we have to bring solutions to truly, truly help individuals that are experiencing one of the most foundational and fundamental challenges in their lives, and that's housing stability.
I had a quick follow-up question, if that's okay.
We're actually running out of time, and I want to make sure we get to at least one more member of the press. So I think whoever was on from Fox News, if you want to raise your hand, we can pull you off mute. And I think that's going to probably have to be it, our overtime. But I would encourage all folks on from the media, feel free to send any questions that didn't get asked, either to myself or directly to one of the mayors if you wanted a specific question, and we'll be happy to follow up and potentially provide additional time as possible.
Well, hi there, Connor with Fox 12 in Portland. I just had a quick question for everyone. There's been a lot of investment in the homeless crisis throughout the state in every city. What have you guys learned about what works, and how can you reassure the taxpayers that the money that will be hopefully sent to you guys will be used in an effective way?
If I can kind of start that off, I think one of the most critical components of our ask is that it's recurrent. You know, we do have lots of programs from one end of the state to the other, up and down, that look really different already. But one thing that's at risk is that lots of them might be funded with competitive grants. They might have been funded with one-time gives. They also might be part of some of the studies, or a single program that's going to be short-lived. And because of that, there's actually a lack of stability even in the really successful program. So a difference in this ask is that it's ongoing and recurrent and direct, which means if a city is using a program and it's not going particularly well, and those accountability measures are not showing improvement, the city can shift without having to rewrite a new grant, changing out staff, going back to the state. That provides that flexibility to pivot. It also provides the flexibility to pivot as needs change. You might have a very successful program that potentially actually solves a problem and is no longer a problem moving forward, and you're able to shift those dollars to address a new problem. That's particularly possible in small communities where you might have the immediate issue of abandoned camps that need to be cleaned up. Well, at some point you're going to get to the point where the camps are cleaned up. Okay, well, now we can focus on some of these prevention methods. Now we can get people social security cards and birth certificates so that they can get the benefits to which they are entitled. Or, we can work on establishing parking areas or shelters, but, those needs can't shift if you don't have that flexibility. And that's something that's unique for this is, despite all of the successful programs we have, here we are in the situation we are. So one, we need to stabilize the programs, which means long-term recurrent funding so that the programs that have continued need are continually funded, and also have that direct spending so that small cities can address the issues, because small cities right now are entirely overlooked and don't have the staffing to even compete for some of the grants we need in order to take care of even the most basic cleanup measures.
Thank you, Mayor. That is all the time we have. Thank you, Connor. Again, this recording will be available on the Oregon Mayors Association website. I believe we also were streaming on the League of Oregon Cities Facebook account. You can find us there. I want to thank everyone for their time. Please feel free to follow up directly with the League of Cities, Oregon Cities, the OMA, and the mayors themselves. Thank you all.